Picture this, a land just baked dry by 3 years of relentless drought. The people are divided, their loyalties are completely torn. And on top of a mountain, you've got this lone prophet standing against hundreds, ready to make one final, desperate appeal to the heavens. The stakes? They honestly could not be higher. We're talking survival, faith, the very identity of a nation. This is the story of a showdown that would change everything. This fire, it's not just some random spectacle, it's an answer. It's the climax to one of the most dramatic stories in the entire Hebrew Bible, a moment of just raw, undeniable power. But what if, and this is the big question, what if it was also the most extreme example of a system, a kind of blueprint that allowed ancient Israelites to communicate directly with God? So, to really get why this fire was such a huge deal, we first have to understand the fight. This wasn't just some abstract theological debate. No, this was a high-stakes, public showdown on Mount Carmel that mattered deeply to every single person living through that drought. To really feel the tension, you have to get the backstory. For 3 straight years, not a drop of rain. Crops are failing, people are desperate. And the political leadership, King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, they've been pushing the worship of Baal, who just happens to be the god of storms and rain. So for the average person, the question is pretty simple. Who can actually make it rain? Whose god is real? And Baal's signature move? Lightning. Yeah, that kind of sets the stage for the perfect test, doesn't it? And the odds are, well, they are not exactly in our hero's favor. On one side, you have the lone prophet Elijah, and on the other, 450 prophets of the state-sponsored god Baal. I mean, talk about an underdog story. This is way more than a debate. It's a public spectacle, with one man staring down an army. So Elijah, he's cool. He lets them go first. For an entire day, they pull out all the stops. They are shouting, they're dancing, they're even injuring themselves in this wild frenzy to get Baal's attention. And the result, after all that? Nothing. Absolute silence. The sky is just as empty and blue as it was when they started. You can just imagine the tension building. And that brings us to the main event. Elijah steps up, and suddenly, fire falls from a clear blue sky. It is a jaw-dropping moment. But how are we supposed to understand it? Well, some scholarship suggests a really fascinating way to look at it, one that kind of bridges the divine and the natural. It doesn't actually force us to choose between a miracle and meteorology. So the key idea here is something called a hypernatural miracle. Now, this isn't about breaking the laws of nature. It's the opposite. It's about God who created those laws, using them with perfect, unbelievable precision. The miracle isn't the lightning itself, but its extraordinary timing, its extraordinary location, and its extraordinary power, all coming together at the exact right second. So how could this actually work? Well, the theory is pretty cool. It combines what we know about ancient language with modern weather science. First off, fire from heaven was basically how ancient people said lightning. Second, we now know about this thing called a bolt from the blue, where lightning can travel from a distant storm and strike miles away under clear skies. Now get this, Mount Carmel is right next to the Mediterranean Sea, and the Bible even says a big rainstorm showed up right after this. So it's totally plausible a thunderstorm was brewing out over the water completely out of sight, creating the perfect setup for this hyper-natural event. Now, that explanation is fascinating, right? But the story is about so much more than just a perfectly timed lightning strike. The real takeaway here is what this whole thing represents. The idea that a direct line to the divine wasn't just possible, but that there was actually a system for it. And this is the million-dollar question, isn't it? Was this kind of power, this ability to petition heaven and get a real response, just for legendary figures like Elijah? Or was this something available to, everyone? From a prophet on a mountaintop to just an ordinary person in their moment of quiet desperation? Well, it turns out the answer was actually put into place long before Elijah's time. It happened during the dedication of the very first temple by none other than King Solomon. And that event laid out the exact blueprint for how anybody could make this kind of appeal. Okay, so this is the core idea we're digging into. Solomon's prayer wasn't just a nice speech for a ceremony. It was the grand opening of a formal, authorized process for petitioning God, a system designed to work for both the entire nation and for a single individual. And here it is. Just look at how detailed this system is. It covers big petitions for the whole nation and small ones for just one person. And you see how it separates things? There are crises caused by sin, like, say, a drought, and then there are what scholars call inexplicable crises. These are the awful things that happen for no clear reason: famine, plague, sickness. The system basically provides an official channel for every kind of human suffering. So this is really important. This wasn't just some abstract theory in a book. It was a living, breathing system. And we see it in action, beautifully, in the story of an ordinary woman named Hannah. Her story is a perfect example of how a regular person could use this exact process. Hannah's problem fits perfectly into that inexplicable crisis box we just saw. She's barren, and in her culture, that was a source of deep personal shame and public humiliation. Her suffering is real, and she feels completely powerless to change it. So what does she do? She doesn't just suffer in silence. During her family's annual trip to the shrine at Shiloh, she seizes her moment. She goes to the holy place and she initiates the process. She makes a direct, personal, and public petition for a son, even making a vow to dedicate that child to God if her prayer is answered. And guess what? The system works. Her petition is granted, and she has a son, who grows up to be the prophet Samuel. But crucially, the story doesn't end there. The cycle isn't complete until she goes back to the shrine. She makes another public appearance, this time to give thanks, fulfill her promise, and basically declare the process a success. It's a complete circle, from suffering to resolution. So when we put it all together, the spectacular, fiery miracle on Mount Carmel and the quiet, personal prayer of a woman at Shiloh, they both point to a single, really powerful conclusion about how these ancient people saw the world. The ultimate takeaway is this: these structures weren't about just passively worshiping from afar. They were built on the belief in a God who could be engaged with, petitioned, and yes, even persuaded. Prayer wasn't a monologue sent out into the void. It was the start of a negotiation. It was an active, dynamic conversation. And that leaves us with a final, pretty big thought to chew on. From Elijah demanding fire from the sky to Hannah weeping for a child, all these stories show a relationship where human actions and words really matter. It suggests that a petition, whether it's grand or humble, could genuinely influence the divine. So, if prayer is a negotiation, what does that tell us about the nature of God and about our role in that cosmic conversation?